Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you wanted to be recording. Um, can I go?
Yes, public comment time. Thank you.
Um, you have a busy agenda, and I just have a quick thing that I wanted to highlight with you. Williston has a significant problem with invasive plants. And last week I hiked Sucker Brook Trail, and you can pretty much see that the buckthorn, which exists along probably 50% of the trail, is stretching 50 or so feet back into the woods from the trail. And as you know, with invasives, the longer you wait to address them, the harder it is to address them. And the bigger the seed bank is, that will then mean that you have to do more maintenance in the long run as well. And so I'm just struck by throughout Williston how difficult a problem this is. And I have land in Westford where in one day's worth of work, it was actually Reed and me for half a day, we're able to take every buckthorn and honeysuckle on a 55-acre parcel that we could find. And it's so different when it's not established. And so I'm just impressed how much needs to be done if we want to be in front of the invasive issue. And so I just wanted to raise the thought that you might want to consider budgeting for mitigation of invasives, such as the way Catamount does. Public Works and Parks and Rec also are responsible for areas that have major infestations, and the schools as well. And so it's possible that if you did budget for something, you might want to have a shared budget. And I'm interested, you probably know I didn't introduce myself, I guess. I'm Chapin Gaynor, and I'm on the Planning Commission, but I'm on here mostly because I do a lot of volunteering for conservation work, including for invasives. And like Laura, although I think you've let it drop, Laura, I have the license so I can use herbicide on public land. I'll have more information about this, more specific information to bring to a future meeting, and I'll talk with Andrew more about it. There is, of course, a prioritization process to consider, but overall, just delaying action requires more effort to overcome the problem and a longer period of time to overcome it because of the seed bank that develops. Does that make sense? And shall I leave it there?
Does Chapin?
It does, yeah. Thanks, Chapin, for bringing that up. I was hiking Sucker Brook Hollow probably 2 weeks ago now, I guess, and it had the same observations that there is some buckthorn and honeysuckle getting established. I can't remember, it was like 3/4 of the way up the trail or something like that. I tried to make a mental note, and then of course completely lost it, but it is pretty obvious. And I was thinking the same thing, that maybe we could get a gaggle of volunteers out there this fall and go to work on them. But
yes, and there really not any, or certainly not anything significant once you get into the woods, the deep woods, but along along entrances to everything. This is true all around town. And of course, we have so much abandoned pasture in town. It's all coming into invasives. Yep. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, I'm not going to stay on with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think okay. Thanks, Chapin.
Any other public comments?
Just one thing to follow up on Chapin. Yeah, I'm letting my license expire.
We heard.
Okay.
Well, it's not dropped yet.
No, so you have me for another month.
Cool. I'll just add that there was a great article on the school projects to remove invasives in the Observer. That was
great.
a program Chapin was facilitating, and they did remove thousands of plants around the Williston Central School property. Yeah.
That's
Is
fantastic.
there still, at one point in time, I thought the town had a weed wrench or whatever it's called that.
Yes, that's what they were using, I believe.
It's in the closet,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's, you can borrow it if you'd like, we let people borrow, yeah, Chapin borrowed it for that event.
Yeah. I think the kids kind of enjoyed like the power that comes with a giant weed wrench.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
They were able to pull some pretty big stuff for middle schoolers. Anyway.
Yeah. And just real quickly, at the top of Five Tree Hill too, there are invasives that ring that whole bench, including giant buckthorn with lots of berries. That I keep wanting to take my electric saw up and cut down. So I could do that if you want me to.
I say we should put a pin in that because I think the view shed there is a topic that. The town owns a lot of land around the top of that, and so you could open up that view shed. It
Mhm.
would be a project that, chainsaws and such, but
Okay.
Okay, not seeing any other comments, we should proceed with the minutes. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the minutes for everyone to take a look at.
I think in 4.3, the second sentence just needs another word at the end of it. And to instead focus on, I think, the memo.
Jim should be here momentarily.
Okay,
Get our kids on the bus.
of course. Okay, if anyone has any other comments, we'll take a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve as amended.
I'll second.
Great. Vote in favor of approving the minutes.
Aye.
I
Aye.
4 to none, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a rather substantive one, for discussion of the ERF memo. The initial link that, Andrew circulated had the old memo.
Oh, okay.
It should be updated now on the website. Yep, there it is.
Okay, I'll go to the,
This is the Word version.
so there's a PDF on the website that's this same version,
but you have the editable.
but we'll edit.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
If you,
Just gotta get it open so I can.
So I guess first we should probably just debrief about what we talked about with Eric. It was a good conversation. I think we got a sense of where the town was at in terms of their budgeting needs. Seems really clear that, Eric personally still very interested in pursuing the parking lot. Morning, Kim. And
Hey, Kim.
we're just doing a quick debrief on the ERF memo, so you haven't missed much. So the main topic obviously was to talk about what the tax on $100 of the grand list value would look like. He explained that, yes, there are about 3 different topics that could be permanently funded under the grand list value. The first was capital for the town, things like ambulances, trucks, plows, things like that. The second thing was infrastructure, bike paths, pedestrian paths, could be others. And then the last thing was conservation. And what I thought was interesting about the proposal is that as the grand list value of the town increases, the revenue from a tax on a specific, $100 would also increase. And so it is not probably going to keep up with inflation, but it is at least a form of keeping up with inflation. It doesn't sort of
static.
Yeah, it's not static, and it also doesn't decline either, as long as the grand list value is increasing. I looked at the presentation from the select board. Grand list value is going up. I mean, not tremendously so, but it's not static. So it basically means that if we calibrated 3/4 of a penny on the grand list value to be about 150,000 a year, that's basically what you would get forever. It would probably go up a little bit. 3/4 of a penny, incidentally, when I did the math, is 165.
Hmm,
It's a little bit more, 161,
yeah, a little bit more than the 150 we have drafted.
which is probably fine. I think it's, I think you did the math, it was like 7/10 of a penny.
Yeah.
I don't think that rolls off the tongue in the same way as 3/4, and it's roughly, the same thing. So I did a little bit of,
Actually, 0.699.
yeah. Eric, any other takeaways from the meeting other than just generally a cordial one and
Was.
not being over promising and what the town will actually recommend to the select board?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was a good, we were here for a half hour or so. And
Give or take, yeah.
it was good to just sit down and chat with Eric and present the perspective of the Conservation Commission and hear from him and the challenges that he faces. I don't envy him at all.
We met 3 days after the
Yeah.
election, so
Yeah.
The parking lot.
the parking lot.
So yes, at that point they knew.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That stinks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was good conversation, and I think take more of my takeaways is we need to get request into him soon, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so the goal really is to finalize this memo. We did a lot of work on this at our last meeting. So I think it's ready to go. I did make some tweaks last night. So I think it's more or less ready for final review of the commission here today. So I'm glad everyone is present, minus Gary, of course, but I think it's ready to go. So the general request is remaining at 150 per year. The question that I think I wanted to just flag is the way that and tone of the conversation was that Eric Wells is presenting the option of what a permanent, penny on the tax rate for these funding sources are. The question is whether or not we want to actually make it as a recommendation or just sort of say that if you did it,
We'd be in.
we should be set at 3/4 of a penny. And so if you just look at that bullet, it's worded right now as a permanent funding mechanism. 3/4 of a penny on the tax rate would generate approximately 150 per year for land conservation.
Should there be an or statement there? And based on what you just said, or if a penny on the tax rate model is adopted for things including conservation, we would want to be set at.
That's what my one question was, like, did we had talked, I don't know if I missed this at the beginning, but like, we had talked about like, if there was a whole penny and we shared it, should we like?
That is not
That's not
what
the
we
model.
heard being on the discussion, is that
Oh,
if
okay.
you were gonna do that, you basically have to say, this is for this is for that, and this is for
Got
this.
it, okay.
And so it would look to me like, I mean, if we could take it to the select board, that's probably how I would want it presented to the voters anyways.
yeah,
Is, 1 penny on the tax rate split among those 3 priorities, and then at the discretion of the town's budgeting manager is not really. That's not what I
It's
think.
not fixing the problem.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, cause it could just be like, no, it's all for information.
That's just another form of adding to the general pool. Like, really it has to be this amount for the capital, this amount for the infrastructure, and this amount for conservation.
Yeah,
And then put all 3 of those to the voters for up or down votes. And
Mhm.
so I guess then the follow-up question is, do we wanna like give them a back? Like, the or statement? As
Like
like,
leave the 150,000 in as the or.
they're not gonna fund, the town's not gonna fund it at 150,000.
Right.
and let me just point out, like, the main body, even above the bullets, is that we request an appropriation of 150.
right, okay,
So like that is still and we told Eric that, like, that's our budget recommendation for the year, 150, that's what we need. We didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about it because it's been pretty consistent. But
he's probably like you and everybody else.
yeah, it was not a
Well,
serious.
So my question is about that underlined sentence. Should it start, we recommend that 3/4 of a penny on the tax rate be put to the voters to fund conservation, or an allocation of 150,000 for next year. That's so that it's like,
Yeah, my concern is that. Either Eric or the select board would be like. Or here's 30 grand.
Yeah,
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 I mean, we can't control what they choose to do, only what we recommend.
I'm happy with this, the way it is, I think. I don't,
Okay.
I feel like if they were inclined to do that, they're gonna do it with this anyway, right? Like, if they're gonna be like, or here's 30 grand, they don't need an or statement to generate that.
I think it's very likely that. I think it's very likely, but not assured, obviously, because I'm not Eric and I'm not on the select board, but like, I think that it's gonna be a dramatically lower budget appropriation, and then it will be presented to the select board as an option that like, if you want to fund it at a higher level, you need to sort of set up this establishment. I mean,
Like Eric's gonna make the or statement. Like he's
Yeah.
gonna, yeah.
He's gonna say you can't fund this at 150 unless you're gonna do this tax rate thing and put it to the voters.
mhm.
So just leave it as a bullet, a permanent funding mechanism, 3/4 of a penny. Last bullet.
yeah, I mean, should we change that to the 160, what that it would actually be?
Yeah, I don't think you need to say 161 or whatever, but.
Yeah,
Get down to the nearest penny.
Yeah,
okay,
okay, yeah, it gives them something up front in the bullets to have a conversation about.
Mhm.
And
yeah,
Eric knows, so he can bring it up and say, you know, I have spoken with David and Eric and Andrew, and here's what they're thinking.
yep. I think that everything else was consistent. I'll just walk through any changes. Andrew, thank you for updating the graph. It looks good. We'll just pause there so everyone can see it.
Oh, yeah.
It's got a nice orange bar saying
Nice.
this would restore funding
Beautiful.
for 150. I think that's good. I also just like the graphic of that. Nice color contrast.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Red
really
line
nice.
going down, green line going up, and orange
Yeah.
is halfway in between. I think that good visual.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Okay.
if we have a presentation for the select board, it should just be that.
I mean,
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
I'm just gonna put this on the screen,
Yeah.
any questions?
yeah,
pretty much.
Please give us $100,000.
right. And see.
Mic drop.
So I think that is pretty much it. I don't think I made one change in the, how did the WCC determine cost of conserving land section? If you just want to scroll down a little bit there, Andrew, thank you. We had a discussion about identifying specific parcels
Mhm.
at our last meeting, and the last version said we collected, or we looked at the top 20 specific parcels.
Mhm.
And I just deleted that top 20 and I said high priority parcels totaling approximately 25-60 acres.
Mhm.
Is that okay? I mean, it seems pretty innocuous, but
Yeah.
when you say top 20,
Right, it gets more personal.
yeah, like whose is that?
Should we add, this is nitty gritty, so please someone be like, Kim, unnecessary. But should we add something to geospatial? Cause it wasn't just geospatial, it was also like values
Yeah.
based, like,
But you could just say completed an analysis
oh yeah, or like.
to identify high priority
geospatial, yeah.
parcels as
Yeah.
geospatial as well as. Substance
got
of the property,
Right, like I don't even,
characteristic space.
I would write a paragraph to describe that, I can't think of a concise way to.
If somebody has a
Somewhere.
question about it, then whoever is there. The day that they're looking at this can explain that it included many factors.
Yeah, this is the select board. I
Yeah.
think simpler is better.
Right, yeah.
An analysis seems to strike the right match. Okay, and then the next section that I did add some pretty significant notes to was in the final section, notes, penny on the tax rate calculation. I just added several sections here so everyone can just read it. First off, I'll say I clarified that it's 75 cents per $100 on the grand list value. Because the penny on the tax rate to me is a very meaningless.
Right.
The only thing that sticks out to me is, I don't know, provide assurance, we don't know that the grand list value will go up. We think, based on, it's kind of like the stock market, we think based on past trends that it will go up, but it's not assurance as, maybe, and would likely increase as land values have tended to increase. I don't know, I just
I
tend to
feel
think
like
about that.
I would be like fine changing it, but I also feel like the trajectory over time is that even over like in the course of crashes, both the market and
Land.
housing values
Yeah.
always do go, like they have never actually
Gone
backtracked.
down.
I appreciate your calling out this word, Reed, I do.
Yeah,
I am a stickler on the difference between assure versus ensure.
yeah,
I did not use the word
Ensure,
ensure.
yeah.
I
Okay.
used the word assure, which is more of a,
I assure you.
reassure,
yeah, it's a reassuring assumption.
Yeah, I like that, okay.
Land
I'm good.
value goes up.
I'm good. The presentation, I know you've reviewed the grand list presentation that the select board was looking at. A brief review of it seemed to me to say that the grand list value might actually go down slightly, or was it just growing less because of the
I can't-
Maple Tree Place?
Meaning the rate of growth is changing.
Yeah, well, there's the valuation of Maple Tree Place dropping constantly.
Are you talking about Matt's presentation
Yeah.
last night?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
generally, the big trend that he's identifying there is that the grand list value is shifting towards residential. And that, generally,
mixed
commercial and industrial properties depreciate over time and aren't invested in at the same rate that residential properties are. Really interesting stuff, if you get a chance to take a look.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, I wasn't quite picking up on that nuance in the 5 seconds I had to review it. So the commercial properties on Maple Tree Place depreciate in value, and so the contribution to the grand list decreases over time,
Correct.
whereas a residential home basically never decreases.
Which is like a planning principle broadly.
That's
It
wild.
is, yes,
Mhm.
and a clarification too is that now some of the apartment buildings are also defined as commercial, and so there's a distinction there. But the idea is that the density that's being built in Taft Corners makes up some of that depreciation.
Okay.
Does that mean if you had like 100-year-old factory in the middle of town and it's fully depreciated, that you owe no taxes to the town? Because it's
Probably.
fully
Or
depreciated?
very low taxes, which is like, it's easy to see how it turns into like what
Mhm.
city planners would like call urban blight, right? Like, or what they
Yeah.
did call urban
Not
blight.
It sounds
enough,
like Jeff
yeah.
Bezos economics.
Yeah,
Um,
But okay.
yeah. But I remember the presentation also mentioned redevelopment, so going in
yeah,
and changing the use or putting a new use, a new commercial use on an old commercial property,
Yes.
like revitalizes that cycle, and so we can encourage that. Anyway, the grand list value is trickier than it used to be, is the only thing I was gonna point out based on Matt's presentation.
Okay. That was interesting.
Right.
Did you end up attending yesterday?
I did not, but I wrote a letter,
Yeah.
just as a personal
great.
note, to the
Yeah,
select board,
thank you.
and I got a couple responses.
You did.
That were positive, yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Have you have heard like from a lot of people?
Yes, I heard from two, select people.
No, I meant like community.
Committee members,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean, dozens of people I've had conversations with, not intentionally, just like. We're either there or they find
Yeah.
out and they're like, oh, how come the bridge is still closed over at Ellenbrook? Like, we use that all the time to get to practice for soccer or,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, yeah,
You're
Yeah,
local,
so
right? I mean,
close.
you live in town.
yeah, right
Yeah.
here, yeah.
It's interesting because it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't,
Yeah, more of like a village residential.
I think it's like families whose kids can walk to school.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is also, but I think that's also why.
The
I
North Wilson
remember.
Road neighborhoods, all those
Yeah.
kids
All
can
the way.
walk. Kids
All the
can
way
like
over to.
come down the bike path and then walk
Right,
across the connection, and they can't do that right now, so.
Yeah. I mean, my kids were biking in all fall and it didn't even cross their minds.
Right,
Because it's just a totally different way of, but anyways, okay.
yeah, you're coming from the other side.
Yeah.
sorry for the detour, but, it's good. Yeah, I'm good with assurance.
Okay. Long way to get there, but we got there. If
I
this,
think this came out really well.
yeah, I like it as well. I'm sorry, Andrew, the last sentence, which we just wanna make sure that everyone's on board with. Um, if the select board considers long-term funding mechanisms for capital infrastructure and conservation funding, the WCC recommends an amount equal to 75 cents per $100 on the assessed land value for long-term ERF funding.
So I was trying to interpret what we mean by that entire last sentence, not just the underlying part. So
Yes.
is that supposed to be as an alternative to the penny on the tax rate approach?
No, I think you're right. That could be clarified. We could just say, considering long-term funding mechanisms, we could just delete that for capital and infrastructure because we don't really know. And we
What
could
else
just
is
say
it?
long-term funding mechanisms for conservation funding. That would be my suggestion. Then it's really clear that.
Or we could just, the whole first clause could, like, we could just start it with the underlined part.
Straight into the WCC.
Yeah.
Do we recommend that if the select board's not considering it though?
Well, we recommend it no matter what, right?
It would be better than our
We want
current
them to
model.
consider it.
Yeah,
Well, technically, we haven't voted on
What
that.
if, what if we say, what if we say the WCC would support establishing a long-term funding mechanism of 0.75.
or are you suggesting, like, the reason that we would need a clause before that is because we don't even know if they're thinking about.
That's right. It's not gonna be on us. Is basically what we heard from Eric, is that only the select board what was his word? Post it, publish it, whatever, like.
Put it to the voters.
Put it to the voters. They need to
Yes.
basically publish this as a ballot.
So
They're on town meeting day.
why don't we say that then, that we recommend the select board warn a vote? I
That's
don't know
it.
how, I don't know how to,
Warn or notice or something.
what
like
is the
that.
right, why, I can't do it. Help me,
You figure out the
Andrew.
right word, with staff.
Is it like,
It's escaping me. It's sort of they're
Propose
bringing a
would be
vote
a
to
general-
the
Yeah.
people.
yeah, can we phrase it like that?
Propose a
When-
vote, I think is.
Propose a vote for 0.75 per $100 in assessed value.
I think it makes sense what you're saying,
Mhm.
but,
We can say that the WCC would recommend that the select board can consider, because
Would recommend consider. Maybe just one hedge.
Would recommend proposing.
would it
How
not
about we
be,
just request that the select board?
Yeah, I
do
like
this?
that, I like that.
Mhm.
I think
More
it's okay to
assertive.
be like assertive in the, it's a memo, they're not gonna be like, oh my god, they wrote request.
WCC recommends the select board develop a,
wait, hold on. You're not in there, are you?
no,
I'm just making sure to put something on paper.
funding mechanism to support conservation.
Is there?
Land conservation.
Yeah.
Williston at a rate of whatever our rate is.
I did have some in here.
How about that? The WCC recommends that the select board develop a funding mechanism to support land conservation in Williston at a rate of.
Select board can't. What we're recommending is that the select board
Board
propose
vote.
this for vote. They can't establish it, right? So like ultimately, that's what we're asking them is to put it forward in a vote on town meeting day. Which then puts the onus on this commission for,
Caucusing.
yeah, caucusing and
All right.
raising the vote.
So how about,
Yeah, so I think we wanna say like the select board warn a vote for the like immediate town meeting day, the next time. 2025 town meeting, right?
I'm supportive of being assertive.
Cause I also don't want them to read it and be like, what do they want us to do?
Right, that could be unclear.
Or have them be like, I think they think we can just do this and we have to do all these, we have to bring it to the people and.
Yeah, that's good.
Eric is very clear on what your request is as well, Eric Wells, and so
He understands.
he's presenting this to them.
And
Yeah.
Andrew, does, well, David's focused on writing, Andrew and Eric, did Eric Wells talk at all, do you guys talk with Eric at all about, the idea of this might be able to fund the ERF and reduce our budgetary ask for like trails maintenance and stuff? So I discussed that briefly at a previous meeting.
We didn't talk about that at the meeting.
No, I think. I guess I was thinking it would obviously reduce the. The capital support, capital budget support. I wasn't thinking necessarily about trees and.
I don't necessarily think we should complicate it. I was just curious if it came up.
Yeah, that is like it's like an interesting,
It's like an angle on it.
right?
But
I'm sorry, Reed, what?
It might be unattractive to voters though.
yeah, we
You're
had said-
already paying for that.
We had
from
said,
different
at one
funds,
point, we
you
had
know, you
had
want
a conversation at one of our meetings about, okay, let's say that we got this. What if we could say it's not just to fund the ERF, it also would cover some trail budget stuff? And
We're waiting for.
Yeah,
it,
we need to,
we
We
need to
just
get
saw
them
that
in
we'll
here.
be.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Just give us one more second here.
That it also could reduce our ask each year in terms of trails budget. Because we could decide that, oh, well, we can use $10,000 of it next year toward trails and 150,000 of it toward the ERF based on what's going on. But I think it complicates it and I don't think we should do it
I also-
unless it was something that came up.
I think one thing that Eric did say is if this goes through. And is approved by the voters, then it only has to be approved by the voters once. And as long as we don't change it.
Mm,
The
what
select
it's
board
for
can-
and
Yeah, the select board can afterwards can choose to, didn't he say the select board could choose to not do it?
correct.
But they can't change it without going back to the voters.
yeah. Okay. Forget I said anything. I just was curious.
I don't think it's a bad idea to actually like implement that after the fact. I just think the messaging is.
I think it would have to go back to the voters if the purpose of the funds would change is the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So
see. I
once
see.
the voters
Oh,
approve
oh,
something like
oh, I
this,
see.
whatever it said the money was gonna be allocated toward, like the ERF in this case. It's done, it goes into the ERF, so, which is, I'm not against, that's just,
I also think there's something to be said about this as an investment in
Yeah,
the
it's a
future
different.
versus an expense.
Yeah.
for-
Yeah,
I think the trails thing is a
Yeah.
capital expense.
I agree. I agree.
cool, alright.
Okay.
Alright, let me read what you wrote.
I think we should say the WCC requests the select board propose.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
And then, yeah, we're gonna have to like. Whip the votes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Got a campaign going. All right,
Or we're
Alright.
allowed to do that, right? Like,
Yes.
we're allowed to like.
oh, yeah.
yeah, Andrew can't, but we can. All right,
And Andrew, there was a issue with the formatting here is that I cannot get that. If you want our work to show below, I can't, oh, it works there.
Are you on the
I'm on the online.
browser? Yeah, that's fine.
I don't
Yeah,
understand.
we can leave format
Yeah.
finalization to Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Make sure that's good. what-
I'm good with that.
I move to approve this memo. With the understanding that Andrew will do the final formatting and removal of comments.
Second.
Excellent. Can we have a vote? Aye,
Aye.
unanimous. It's
Cool.
approved.
Nice work, everyone.
Yeah.
Especially. Eric.
Yes, thank you so much for having that meeting. Kim, do you want to invite them to
Oh,
join
yeah.
us?
They can all come sit to their
So
chair.
we'll- Okay, cozy with Andrew. We got plenty of space. Come on in.
Morning.
Morning.
Here, I can move around to the other
So you
side.
come with me, Laura.
Yeah.
If you would like to bring those, we can,
I don't need
Are you sure?
Yes.
there are plenty of
You wanna
chairs.
slide even further, Eric? We might be able to get
get.
another person on the corner.
Yeah.
Also, Please feel free to.
Please come sit up front if you're up
I'm like
first,
over here in an island by myself.
just so we know who we're conversing with. There you go.
Yes. Dave, we can plug into last 15 minutes on the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Would anyone like to?
Okay. Great. We're about 15 minutes behind, but I think it's okay.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you for your patience. The next topic is pre-app 2504 for the Marcotte subdivision. Andrew, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, yeah, and just generally for process for both of these, I'll go through the staff notes. I'm gonna introduce it and then I'm just gonna show you the site plan early in the introduction because you often want to see it. And then we'll give the applicants some time to make any comments that they may have, and then you can ask questions and discuss the memo as drafted.
Great, thank you.
Large as possible. All right, so the first request is a pre-application request for a 9-lot subdivision on Caboose Lane, ARZD. The parcel is approximately 200 acres. It has an existing crossing at Caboose Lane and a forestry road. Parent parcel is greater than 10.5 acres, so it is subject to Williston's open space protection provision. And the applicant has not decided if they plan to participate in growth management or inclusionary zoning at this time. The proposed site plan shows 8 building lots and 1 open space lot. You see the lots listed there, and this is where I'll shift to that. I'll just show you the plan. Click on it. So this is the broad view. You can see the building lots are highlighted in this kind of yellow orange. And I'll zoom in on this. The wetlands in green, and then slopes are the dark kind of gray, and then the steep slopes are the blue. Did I get that right, Brian?
Yep.
So this is a zoomed in version of the lot plans with the open space cut out. You can see the wetlands and sort of where those lots are placed in respect to those. And then this is Caboose Lane currently. It will currently goes to about here. There is a forestry road that is existing that actually goes all the way up here. And we can discuss that more in a second. Back to staff notes. As you saw on the site plan, lot 1 and 2 will be served by curb cuts on South Road, and then 3 and 4 will have access, or 3 through 8, excuse me, will have access through Caboose Lane. The applicant has not identified the half-acre building envelopes that are required. All 8 of the lots will be served by on-site septic and wells. This next blurb basically just saying that it's subject to growth management or inclusionary zoning. If they chose the inclusionary zoning pathway, they would have to provide 1 lot at 100% the area median income. Happy to answer questions about that if you have them. I'm gonna keep moving. So going into the site plan review, there are a number of constraints that are identified, including open space, core habitat, travel corridors, unique natural communities, primitive trails, scenic view sheds, and streams, wetlands, and lakes and ponds. So for ERF prioritization, this parcel is identified as a high conservation priority. The town is interested in conservation opportunities for this parcel, and the applicant has contacted staff to discuss opportunities for the proposed open space. For primitive trails, and there are 2 desired primitive trails shown on map 17 of the comprehensive plan. This is a picture of the official map, shows it more clearly. It's the same. You can see that they extend down from the Lake Iroquois recreation district, and one goes up towards South Road here. And the other extends north, ultimately, going towards Mud Pond.
Neither of those trails are in existence today.
There are trails on the property, but the extent of those trails are not.
And
Yeah.
there are like neighbors, I wish, that Terry were still here because she owns some land in here that has like an old class 4 that she lets people informally make this connection, like a little to the side of it. So I think there are people like traveling this way on bike and on foot. And I think Vast also goes like
Not anymore.
parallel, or did at one
It
point.
did way back, but
Yeah.
snow machines haven't been out there in a long
There's
time.
not snow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And John can tell you more, but there are existing trails that are used by your neighbors, and yeah, we can discuss that more if you'd like.
So I guess my point is, I think there are like desire lines that people are using, if that makes sense.
So significant wildlife habitat area, parcel has both core habitat and wildlife travel corridor. The staff recommendation, or it's actually the bylaw requires that a habitat disturbance assessment be prepared by a qualified wildlife biologist. This process now goes through the town, so the applicant should contact staff following pre-application to coordinate an HDA. Staff is recommending that the HDA be conducted only on the northern portion of the parcel where development is proposed. For unique natural communities, there are a number of these mapped throughout town. The subject parcel is identified partly as part of the Upper Lake Iroquois watershed unique natural community. You can see on the map here that the natural community is mapped in red here. It just barely touches the it's the southwest portion of the parcel. The proposed development is up in the north here. And so none of the proposed development is immediately adjacent to this natural community. And so staff is recommending that the HD does not need to specifically assess this area. There are no areas identified as uncommon, rare, threatened, or endangered species. Therefore, this does not apply. Same goes for farmlands of local importance. No areas are mapped on this parcel. For scenic viewshed, there are a number of scenic viewshed areas mapped on this parcel, including primary foreground, secondary background, and secondary foreground. The foreground, primary and secondary foreground are on the right here. Those are more due to the slope. This is a hill. And generally those are viewed from further distances. The let's see, sorry. Well, the one along the road, this is the I believe it's actually this might be wrong, typo on my part. I should say primary background, secondary background, and then secondary foreground is this lightest area here. Those are view sheds from the road. And so, yes.
Yeah.
And the bylaw states that landowners who wish to develop these areas should work with the Conservation Commission and the DRB to maximize the protection of these view sheds. Lot 6 is proposed within the secondary background, and lots 1 and 2 are proposed in the secondary foreground. So lot 6 up in here on the kind of medium pink, its colors are pretty bad.
Yeah, we had a few colors of
background.
background.
And then lot 1 and 2 are closer to South Road, and staff is recommending that the WCC discuss the potential impacts with the applicant. There are no special flood hazard areas on this parcel. And then moving into watershed health. It's a fair amount of text here, so if you're okay with it, I'll just kind of give the high notes. This proposal is identified as high risk because it proposes to disturb more than 2 acres. The requirement is that the proposal includes a professionally prepared erosion prevention and sediment control plan as part of the discretionary permit. For wetlands protection. There are class 2, class 3, and 2 unnamed streams on the subject property. The bylaw requires that the delineation, or that the proposal includes a delineation of those wetlands. There are pretty strict restrictions on impacts to wetlands, but they may be crossed by roads, trails, or utility lines. Happy to answer questions about that, but you can see on the site plan here, the green mapped areas as wetlands. Important to note that the existing forestry road is already a crossing of those wetlands, and because it's existing, it wouldn't be. Well, you see what I'm saying?
Are there culverts?
New
on the
disturbance.
forestry road?
There are, yes. And so then this map on the right just shows what our maps show as unnamed streams. They coincide with the wetland delineation that the applicants proposed, but
Looks like Reed
I
has
don't know
a
if this is a new approach, but I really appreciate these side by side of the site plans, of wetlands, of the streams. That's really helpful.
Yeah, Reed.
Can I ask a quick question? I assume that the forestry road has to be improved. Is that part of the concept, is to improve that portion going back to the further back lots?
Forestry Road was designed by a professional forester when we did it 10 or 15 years ago. So the culverts are there, all appropriate size, properly located. He took into account water flows and stuff. So I would say that the base of the road is there. It obviously is going to need a little ditching on edges and stuff to finesse it. Obviously, then you're going to need your top coats of different layers of gravel, fabric.
To withstand more traffic.
Yeah, oh yeah, right now it's not drivable year round, but it is designed. I mean, we've actually had tractor trailer trucks up there when we did the logging. So either in the middle of summer or in the winter when it's frozen, it's designed with grades and everything, curves, the location is going to stay the same. It just needs to be brought further standards up higher to make it a year round driveway, if that answer the question.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question, is that it looks like from this drawing that you're really trying to wedge these, half dozen or so parcels in between what you think will be wetlands. What happens if a delineation comes in that says, one of these parcels is all wetlands? Would you try to find a place to shift it somewhere else, or what's your thinking around that?
So the northern 2/3 of the wetlands were actually delineated on the ground by Fitzgerald Environmental this fall. Haven't been confirmed by the state yet, but those are on the field delineations. As you can see, the parcel's pretty substantial in size. So as you move to the south, more of a desktop walking of the parcel was done. So we know we need to finish the southern delineation, but we don't expect substantial changes from what's there. It's not just drawing it based on contours or A&R, online results. Yeah,
You're pretty confident.
we're pretty confident.
And then the parcels directly on the south road there. I noticed that it goes right up to the edge of the road.
Yep.
What is, in the context of that view shed discussion that Andrew had just raised, what's the thinking around the development for those two?
So if you zoom in a little bit on the ortho photo, it doesn't show up on our plans, but there's a power
you
line.
wanted this one.
Yeah, there's a power line that's pretty offset from South Road. So it's probably 50 feet, off the southern side of South Road. So we expect, once the easement is considered, that they'll roughly be 100 feet from the southern edge of that easement to the limiting wetland buffer on the south side. So currently, we're not anticipating that the building envelope will be north of that power line. So the lots would be set back from South Road, and then in consideration with the view shed, the topography does go down to those wetland areas. So they're lower and they'll be further set back from the road is what we're anticipating.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then looking at watershed protection buffers, most of you are familiar with this, but there is a requirement for a 50-foot buffer around class 2 wetlands. And the high water mark of unnamed streams. Move to open space development. As mentioned, this parcel is required to set aside 75% of the as it's 75% open space. The applicant has proposed 194 acres of open space, which is 96% of the total parcel area. The bylaw states that open space must be contiguous within a subdivision, except where doing so is not feasible due to small isolated areas of watershed buffer or site constraints. There's a definition there of what contiguous open space is. And you can see that says the Conservation Commission and the DRB will consider the context of the proposed development, including the type and relative value of resources as identified by the bylaw to be protected, and the configuration of open space that will ensure the protection of those resources. The bylaw requires that open space include watershed protection buffers and slopes of greater than 30%. And it should include slopes between 15 and 29%, with the landowner's right to beneficial use of their property considered there. As we kind of already stated, the northern part of the parcel is really what's going to be developed, and the proposed home sites avoid the class 2 wetlands and their buffers. And I think that the landowner has done a good job of trying to protect the slopes that are identified. The Conservation Commission can discuss this further with the applicant if they'd like. And then lots and home sites. This is discussing the half-acre requirement for those lots, which should be included at the time of discretionary permit. And there are some exceptions, obviously, within that half-acre, including wastewater, access, and utilities. So what follows are a list of findings and recommendations. Let's just take a look at the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. I couldn't remember if I had a choice in this one.
Yeah, no, it all looked pretty well in order to me too, so I'll just open it up to questions, or if the applicants would like to add anything to the staff review.
I guess the only thing I would just reiterate is that the existing forestry road is our primary means of access. We did look at other alternatives, like we do have frontage on Beartown Lane, but once the delineation started coming back, it just there were too many new crossings there. So this was our path of least resistance. We do note that there's 3 crossings associated with it, but as their existing crossings, the wetland impacts are still substantially different. So there's the reason we're able to show more than 5 units off a driveway, which is generally a Williston standard for units off a driveway. There's also a consideration in the bylaw that allows for, I think it's up to, I don't think there's a maximum, but if you develop with a density less than 1 unit per 10 acres, you can do whatever the DRB will allow. So we're filing this application under that bylaw, and I think we can do 13 off that driveway if we look at, 1 unit per 10 acre density, and we're proposing, what is it, 9? John's house is an existing duplex, so there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 11 because there's 2 existing single families in between the parcel in question on the north side of Caboose Lane that currently have access, and then John's house is that southern lot, which is considered a duplex at this point. So we're at 11.
So for providing means of egress, will there be an HOA established in order to, collectively pool funds for tree removal and line maintenance.
Yeah,
Right? This
yeah.
all is gonna be on private land.
Yep, so there will be an HOA for road maintenance, and we're also expecting an HOA for stormwater maintenance as well.
Mhm.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? I guess I had one on the road. You see a fork in the road, about 3/4 up. Is that currently in existence now in the graded forestry road?
That southern spur is not part of the existing forestry road.
Okay, so that's a new crossing in the wetland area.
That would be the only new crossing.
Okay, so will that be covered under the habitat disturbance assessment?
It should be, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I think staff noted the northern third should be part of that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I don't have any other questions.
I don't either, I'm good, I think, yeah, guys did a great job laying all this out, Andrew, thanks for all the work putting together, the findings and recommendations, nicely articulated as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate the applicant's very generous identification of open space in the proposal, 95% of the total acreage. That's we'd love to see more of that. It's great. Thank you.
We think the open space is important. We've had the privilege of using it for many decades.
Mhm.
My parents bought this in about 1960, which is the only reason it's still there. I moved out there 40+ years ago. But we do have a network of trails. The neighborhood uses them extensively. And I'd like to encourage that. We cannot afford to give it away, but we'll be talking with Andrew and whoever is appropriate for public ownership of some sort for the vast majority of that open land so that it's perpetual. The fact that it butts up to Lake Iroquois Recreation District,
Mhm.
it's literally, in my opinion, a once in a lifetime opportunity. For the town to acquire that and then have control over it in perpetuity. So it's a great thing. I mean, we had the option of just selling the whole parcel. If you sell that, and who knows who buys it, who knows what they would want to do or what they would allow. So at this point, we are comfortable with that. We obviously need to monetize a little bit the property that we have out there. So we think we've come up with a pretty reasonable plan to literally keep some money in the family, if you will, and still be able to work, with that perpetual ownership of it out there.
Mhm.
It's, well, Andrew has walked it with me, and it's, in my opinion, pretty spectacular land.
Mhm.
Lot of potential.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Reed.
My only question is about the sculpt of the trail easement or the desired trails, excuse me, map. It seemed like the northern desired trail connection is probably not much of an issue. It's so far away from the proposed development and stuff. The one that goes to the west would kind of go into this area where you've got these lots proposed. So I was curious how you viewed the potential of having a trail easement that can connect to the west, and also interested in other committee members' opinions on whether a connection that includes the gravel road, whether that would be
Yeah,
desirable.
Yeah. Any access really to South Road, I think would be the main point of that trail, right?
Say more about that.
Yeah.
The gravel road, the main,
The driveway, but the
Yeah.
driveway double as the trail.
oh,
in a
I see,
sense.
Right.
and be publicly accessible.
Right.
And yeah, there would have to be a spot where it comes off in that fork. Yeah.
So curious what your thoughts, have you thought about that, given
Oh,
that?
Yeah, we've thought about it. The designation there as the trail, that is something that the town just kind of like,
Yeah, it's
Drew
like,
in
it's a
decades
broad
ago.
stroke, like something
You know,
around here, yeah.
right. So I don't look at that as the magic corridor.
Mhm. And you may know better knowing the land, if there's a,
Yeah, well, I definitely know the land
Yeah.
very well. You're right, the one that is off to the right of our picture here, there's actually 2 or 3 trails that go through there now, and they're fine, there's no issues there. The one that does come up towards South Road, I would definitely like to continue discussions on where that's located. Beartown Lane parallels and comes in a long ways and comes very close to our border, and that's a town road. I would prefer to have
the connection
the
be.
public using
Mhm.
a public road as opposed to the private driveway.
And staying away from the residences in theory.
As much as possible. I mean, there's gonna have to be a trail in there. But there is some, seems, well, I have a bias, but there's a potential, reasonable way, 1 or 2 options to get it into there. So it's like, we're not totally opposed to it. I'm not a huge fan of putting it just automatically up the driveway. Because some people tend to take advantage of such a thing and,
If it was a trail for the HOA, residents, a smaller population, but being public, you know, I don't
Right.
think doubling a private driveway is
I
generally.
mean, Beartown Lane is right there and it's literally parallel and it's a completely town road.
Yeah, I'm interested in further conversations about it after you get a little further,
Right.
here, yeah, cause we have to look at, the feasibility from our perspective in terms of. Actually bringing to life a connection, we have to consider like the likelihood of being able to do different things.
Well, right now, even if it went up Caboose Lane, it just ends on South Road. There is no,
Right, yeah,
no trail on the other side.
yeah, we have some desired connections on the other side, but we haven't taken action on them yet.
Right, it seems like mapping the existing trails and where people are currently coming from. And going to might be really useful, because if there's already people moving between Mud Pond and Lake Iroquois informally, then perhaps like the building of the trail network is actually 90% done or whatever, and we're just like sanctioning and formalizing and creating these.
There's a well-developed trail all the way from Lake Iroquois District, all the way up to what eventually becomes Mud Pond. And then because we've done some limited logging in the way past, I have maintained those logging trails through brush hogging on a yearly basis and stuff, so they're very people friendly in most respects right now. So
I think it'd be worth like having an action item be like GPSing, with like walking with you, maybe with like a GPS unit, and mapping what's currently on
Understand
it.
what's there.
Yeah,
Andrew, I noticed that there is not a recommendation about the trail. Is there a reason why, or, based on this discussion, should we add something about recognition of existing trails and working with the applicant on where proper trail placement should be?
I think the wording of that, what you just said, would be appropriate, yes.
Okay. Would the applicants have any concerns with that as the addition to these recommendations?
well, we recognize there's gonna be some trails. A lot of the trails are gonna be on what we expect will become public land. For what that's worth, but the connection to somehow head towards South Road, Beartown Lane, that will cover part of the land that we're gonna be keeping. I say keeping, it's gonna be part of the plan unit development. So there is gonna have to be a way, and there is realistically a couple of ways that it could potentially go. Wetlands complicate everything, so it's why that's gonna be a discussion point. I don't know what the outcome will be, but
Yeah.
I'm just, my first choice is not to just automatically use Caboose Lane.
But you're open to
Makes sense.
a recommendation that we continue discussions
Oh,
about
absolutely.
trail.
Yeah, we have to continue the discussion, but
let's add that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's add that as a recommendation. It's not a placement of any kind. It's a recommendation that, you continue to work with Andrew, and potentially this commission if it comes to it, on the placement.
once tried to ride my bike from Mud Pond to Williston, sorry, to Lake Iroquois through a former commissioner's land, and she told me exactly what to do. And I still ended up on the other side of the ridge in Richmond.
That is one thing. The land is, it's very untouched in most respects, and it's very confusing. We've literally in the past had Williston Rescue and police up there looking for people at night because they leave Lake Iroquois. There is no demarcation going from the public land to our private land, and people get hopelessly lost up there. We've had people end up at our house saying, I'm looking for Lake Iroquois. That's where I started. And I literally tell them, go to South Road, follow Oak Hill Road. It's very confusing up through there. That would
Could
be
be an improvement to have some signage.
yeah, some
there's
signage
private.
needs to be there
Yeah.
long term. And right now, there's a lot of trees that are down near the Lake Iroquois end. And it's an area I don't get down to, and I am not, haven't been able to get down with a chainsaw or my tractor to do anything. So there is a section of the trail now which is really not navigable. And part of that is actually on Lake Iroquois District's property. And then where it transitions, most people don't even know where the transition is. I mean, Andrew saw it and it's kind of like, well, it's here, but if you were just walking, you would never know, of course.
Okay, we should wrap this up. Let's look at the final recommendation.
That's what I added here.
Okay. Very good. Any edits to that? Okay,
I'm just, I mean, there is also the connection, it's not contentious, but there's also the connection in the north. So I didn't know if that number 7 should mention trail connection between the southern portion and South Road and the southern portion and parcels to the north.
well, I'm unclear what you mean by that. Parcels.
Toward Mud Pond.
There was like
There's-
two wet,
Number 7 called out the connection to
western
the west.
straight up and then like a more eastern.
Right,
And I think both should be mentioned, even though the one on the
Right.
toward the east is kind of a no-brainer because
Yeah.
it's pretty existing. And
I think trying to, I hear what you're saying. I think it's the north versus south. It's such a big parcel. It's
Yeah.
kind of.
that's true, and it's on a diagonal.
Yeah,
Between
Yes, actually, could you get out a compass and measure the exact?
The angle.
distance?
yeah, exactly. I think that captures the
maybe
intent.
in both South Road and the Mud Pond region. or something like that. Parcels to the north and east.
The real issue is that, this applicant's name is not on any of those land titles actually connecting to Mud Pond, right?
Yeah, but that's how we
It-
build
but
the
it-
connection,
Yeah.
bit by bit.
Yeah, we have to get the easements because we can't act on them until we have enough easements sort of aligned, so. Make the connection.
Okay, great. Can we get a motion to approve these recommendations?
I move, we approve the recommendations as edited.
I'll second.
Excellent. Put it to a vote. Aye.
Aye.
All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, because no one's here. It's unanimous.
One last thing, can you identify yourselves for the public record? We do that at TRD and I think it's,
Brian Courier, Laurie Burke, Civil Associates.
John Marcotte, applicant.
Dave Marcotte.
thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay,
Beautiful site plans, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, really easy to read.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are 15 minutes behind, but I think the other business will probably, if
Good to see you again.
if we even need it,
Take care.
move quickly. So the next topic is it's actually an application from last year, 2409 Benedito subdivision. And I take it that these are the applicants?
Yes.
We are the applicants. Excellent.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome back.
Why don't we start with, for the record, who we're speaking with today? Go ahead.
Yeah, Nana Benedetto, I own 1318.
And I'm Doug Goulet from Trudell Consulting Engineers. Excellent, thank you. I'll let Andrew kick us off.
All right.
All right, this is a discretionary permit review for a proposed subdivision at 1318 Butternut Road in the ARZD. And the subject parcel is 10.76 acres, and it contains an existing barn and single-family home served by on-site septic and drilled well. The applicant has proposed 2 new home sites located in the field to the south. It appears that that area has been pastured for at least 20 years, probably longer. Since the parcel is greater than 10.5 acres, it is subject to the open space provisions, and I will note that the prior review of this parcel, it was believed that it was less than 10.5 acres, and so we've gone from understanding it as not an open space parcel to now an open space parcel. The applicant has proposed a design that creates 3 building lots and separates the open space lot into 3 separate parcels, 1 for each building lot. They have proposed that the deeds will restrict the uses of open space lots and link each one to the building lot. Now I'll do the, once again, we can just look at it. So this is the site plan. We can see the building lots are highlighted in red, and open space lots are exterior, and they're these darker lines here. I will mention that this is a largely untested proposal as far as the current bylaw is concerned with open space. And this will be the main discussion that the Conservation Commission has, and I'll get into it a little bit further here. But any questions immediately on the site plan, just like symbology, what things are, etc.
No, I actually thought it was pretty clear. I have questions around the placement that's being proposed, but
Okay.
I was clear on the site plan. Thank you.
So going back to the staff report, we see the sort of summary that we just looked at in text. So the existing lot the lot for the existing dwelling at about 1.5 acres with 4.4 acres of open space, and then 2 smaller proposed building lots with smaller open space lots proposed. The proposed project will create less than 4 dwellings and therefore is exempt from growth management and inclusionary zoning. And here I've added a staff recommendation that gets into what I was just saying. So the Conservation Commission should discuss the open space requirements and site design, and then edit finding 4 and provide any additional recommendations they are appropriate to the DRB. They should also discuss the watershed protection buffer delineation. You see recommendation 1. I've added that just to try to guide the discussion. So going into the project history, sort of already said this, so I won't repeat myself. Was an open space, now it is. December 6th, 2023, the Conservation Commission made some recommendations. Site plan does identify wetlands and their buffers as requested. The proposed development does not encroach upon those watershed protection buffers. And the applicant has worked with staff and proposes signage demarcating those watershed protection buffers on a 100-foot interval. This is shown on one of their sheets, and I can show you they have a proposed sign actually on the sheet. A runoff and erosion control plan was prepared by Trudell Consulting / Bowman. And then no habitat disturbance assessment was required, and no trail easement was required nor proposed. So getting into the resources mapped on the parcel, it is an open space development as discussed. There are also scenic view sheds, streams and wetlands, and the core habitat and wildlife travel corridors should be checked there. But it's a very minor part of the parcel, so we'll get into that. For ERF prioritization, this parcel is identified as medium priority. You can see there's some adjacent conserved land to the east. So the significant wildlife habitat area, you can see here the travel corridors are mapped in brown hatched area, and core habitat is green. It just barely touches the northern portion of this parcel. The site plan shows no construction within these mapped areas, and there are no areas mapped that way in the southern portion of the parcel where the proposed lots are located. There are no uncommon, rare, threatened, or endangered species, no unique natural communities or farmlands of local importance. For scenic viewshed, subject parcel is within the area mapped as secondary foreground viewshed. Similar to the last application you reviewed, this is looking at the viewshed as seen from Butternut Road. The Conservation Commission did not recommend any mitigation to possible viewshed impacts at pre-application. You may remember the parcel, the area of development is actually located at a higher elevation than the road. And you can see that on the site plan. For special flood hazard areas, there are none, so that does not apply. Watershed health. The plan was proposed as requested. It is high risk, and the plan does demonstrate compliance as required by the bylaw. For wetlands protection, there are both class 2 and class 3 wetlands identified on the site plan. No development is proposed within either of those classifications. There is that will leave it there. Thank you. So watershed protection buffers, as mentioned, they need to be clearly demarcated. The bylaw says planting, fences, or other landscape features like boulders. The applicant has worked with staff, and there's been sort of a trend that applicants are proposing signage as opposed to these options. And generally the Conservation Commission and the DRB have been amenable to those recommendations. So the Conservation Commission should confirm a signage placed at a 100-foot interval is sufficient to delineate those watershed protection buffers. And you'll see that in recommendation number 1. So moving into the open space, proposed site plan identifies the 3 building lots and the 3 open space lots. This is the first time that the Conservation Commission and DRB have reviewed an application for open space that proposes open space as separately ownable lots for each building lot. So the request is that the Conservation Commission discuss if the proposed site plan meets the requirements for open space in 31.7 and 31.8. And specifically, if the proposed open space is contiguous, then edit finding 4 accordingly. They should then decide if they would like to provide an additional recommendation to the DRB. So going into the key parts of open space development discussed in 31.7, I can go through this at a pretty fine detail if you'd like. I'm not sure how many Conservation Commission members have had a chance to read it. Is there any sort of preference?
I've read it.
Okay. I won't read it verbatim.
I'm sure we have enough time for that anyway.
Yeah. So basically, there are requirements for what open space should include. The proposed open space does include all required protected lands. The chapter also states that open space must be contiguous within a subdivision and surrounding parcels, except where doing so is not feasible due to site constraints like a watershed protection buffer. There is that, once again, a definition of what a contiguous open space looks like. And it's that there's some discretion in the bylaw for the Conservation Commission and DRB to establish standards for continuity. And it says that those two boards will consider the context of the proposed development, including the type and relative value of resources to be protected. Let's see. Don't want to repeat myself.
Well, I guess I'll say, Andrew, I think you laid this out really clearly. And I appreciated laying up this question. It's clearly a good one for the commission. I want to just, given that that is the major discussion for this application, I'd like to pause there and maybe we can scroll to the recommendation, but I'd like to hear from the applicant on why it was sort of laid out this way, given it's given that, you know, what's being asked of us today is to review a very unique proposal.
Do you mind? I just want to state this last, highlight this last bit, which I think leaves some interpretation and some discussion to be had between the Conservation Commission and the applicant. Is 3177. Basically, it states that protected open space must be separated as a separate lot. The singular language in this requirement seems to suggest that it would be one lot, but it does not clearly require it. And so that's something to discuss as well. So I'll leave it there. And let me know if you want to look at the site plan or.
Before we move forward, I just want to say that my cousin is your neighbor. And so I'm going to participate in this discussion about open space, but I think I won't vote because I don't know. I just don't know if it'll come up in a family gathering later. I have no idea how he feels about it.
Right. Do we have
that's reasonable?
Okay. Four makes a quorum, right?
Yeah.
Abstain.
Yeah.
But I think I'll still talk about like the interpretation of this because it's broader than this application.
Yeah.
Is that fine? Otherwise, I can just sit here and listen.
I think it's your comfort level, whether or not you want to fully recuse.
I don't think you have a conflict of interest.
I don't
No,
think so
no, I
either.
don't think so either. I have maybe he has no feelings at all.
Would you, why don't we start with the proposed layout of the development?
Sure, so Andrew can go to the site plan first and then. So to reiterate, as Andrew said, and as the staff report said, this site has very limited natural resources. We have a wetland that runs along the three sides of it, but just barely. And then there's an associated wetland, 50-foot wetland buffer because it's a class 2. And then again, the core habitat is just a very small area to the where's the north arrow? Yeah, in that area there. So the vast majority of the property has no natural resources. That would be the goal of preserving in an open space development. There's no uncommon, rare, threatened, or endangered species, no unique natural communities, no farmlands, scenic view sheds is a discussion point I don't really understand, but no flood hazard areas and
It's the view from the road.
Right, no planned trails. So I think if we go back to definition 31.7.3 in their staff report, we should read that again and think about how this definition of open space, continuous in a subdivision, contiguous open space is generally defined as an area of forest and or natural community that is unfragmented by development and remains in a natural state. So that's not what we have on the site. We don't have a forest. It's wide open pasture. There's no natural communities other than what we just talked about along the very fringe. So, if that's the goal of the open space, this site, unlike the one you just reviewed, doesn't click any of those boxes, doesn't check off any of the boxes. To back up a little bit, we're here only because this property was, I think the assessor's lister's card had 9.8 acres. when we did our pre-app review, our surveyors, I think, digitized the tax map and it came out to 2.3. And then when the surveyors actually got out there and located everything, we ended up being at 10.76. So we're, the previous application had 190 acres beyond, above and beyond the 10.5 acre threshold. We have 0.26 acres beyond it. So, this project is probably somewhat unique in that we just barely qualify for the open space development. And we don't have, or we have very few natural resources that one would think should be protected in an open space development. So having said that, Andrew, maybe you'll scroll to the staff page that has, I think that will keep going. It has the kind of three options. Yeah, that's great right there. So the left-hand one is what, left-hand plan view is what's proposed. The right-hand plan is something staff sketched as maybe something that was more in line with the intent of the.
I take it as
the bylaw.
Yeah.
So, the issue, I think maybe it's easier to point to the flaws of the staff report. And that increases common open space area, limits building envelopes or building lots. And that's what is shown is, the pink is 25% of the total parcel, green is 75%. That brings, marketable lots, those two lots down in the corner, they're very small. They're in the lowest part of the property. It does maximize the open space in the open meadow, but again, there's no natural resources of value in that meadow. It's just a horse pasture at this point. So what we're looking at is the left-hand view. The green is what would be open space made up of three sub open space lots, if you will. So the goal would be, this would be 3-lot subdivision. If I'm building or buying lot 2, which is the sort of the middle lot, if you will, just for discussion, I'm having to purchase the building. So that lot would be made up of 2 subordinate lots, the building lot and the open space portion. And the open space portion obviously would have all the restrictions following the bylaws that prohibit certain uses within that open space. When you add the 3 open space lots together, they are contiguous. There's obviously the green is contiguous and goes around the building lots. They are platted separately as in accordance with the bylaw. So I think that's we're relying on the ambiguity, if you will, of the bylaw to create lots that we feel. I mean, this lot was looked at, by you folks in the DRB. If you scroll up a little bit, the conventional subdivision, everybody was, satisfied with that. As far as house layout and such. So we're not changing that. We're just, morphing it to meet the open space development requirements. With this parcel probably being somewhat unique in that it lacks natural resources that wouldn't typically be. I think the assumption is if you've got over 10 acres, you must have some large chunk of land that would meet some of the natural resources. This isn't one of those.
Go ahead, Dave, and then I have like a comment to that.
Okay, I'll start with my question, which is, can you explain the, I'll call it a gerrymander on lot 3. You have that pink spot going all the way over there. Can you explain that? And then also, is it typical, and this might be a question for Andrew, is the septic? Why is the septic, it seems like the mounds are actually out of the development zones and part of the open space, and is that common? And I'll take the answer to the first question.
Yeah. So on lot 3, it looks like that because, we are allowed 25% buildable area, so we didn't want to give up that. So we're trying to create the building lot that surrounds the lot that was, or the building site that was perceived at sketch plan being higher up on the meadow, away from Butternut Road. But we wanted to have a future homeowner the option to either put the primary house closer to the road if they didn't like this layout, potentially build an accessory barn, shed, ADU could go there, tiny house, for instance. We didn't, to be honest with you, we didn't want to give up that would reduce it down to, we didn't want to give up our 25% buildable lot. And that is definitely a viable spot for a non-open space use, if you will. Look, I agree, it looks funky, but it allows flexibility, and that's what we're trying to do is, allow somebody to say, I'm fine with a small house close to Butternut Road. And maybe they want to burn up where the house is shown.
So I guess that answers the question, is that you're selling these parcels and you're not developing them. You're just selling the parcels?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is so this would be the deed restrictions in the sale?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, you would be buying that lot knowing that those are your only spots you can build on. Second question, mound systems can be in the open space. On lot 3, for instance, really limited because of the wetland buffer. So the soil testing revealed that was a suitable site. And we need certain isolation distances between the water supply and the well and the wastewater.
Yep.
Similar lot 2, the mound system is on the open space just because it can be.
Okay. Is that common, Andrew? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I got it right.
Great.
So,
Okay.
this is, I guess, a general comment, or maybe 2 general comments. One is that I want to address the idea that it's meadow, and so therefore it's not a unique natural community. I think, just put my ecologist hat on for a sec. Meadows provide a lot of important ecological function to a range of species and a whole bunch of ecosystem services. We don't have to get into the actual ecology, but just that's not the reason to exempt this from the bylaw, because it's
Just forested, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then can you go back to, and then I think the question or the reason to potentially exempt it is that it technically meets all of the guidelines, and we should just, maybe not for this parcel, or maybe for this parcel, but for sure in a different conversation in the future, if we don't like the precedent that this would set, perhaps we should reimagine the language so that it's clear about how specific contiguous needs to be, and if having breakups within that continuity defeats the purpose of the bylaw, right? If the purpose of the bylaw is to provide habitat connectivity, then it needs to be stated more than just contiguous, right? Because maybe this is contiguous and doesn't actually provide habitat connectivity because it breaks up the interior, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That might be a bigger conversation. And then I remembered my second comment, which is that I think a lot of times we have open space managed by HOA and common. That's certainly the case for my neighborhood.
Yes.
And I see huge advantage of that, not disadvantage to it. I think that's a broader conversation of how do we want that? How much guidance should that bylaw give for future applicants? Maybe, I don't know how other people feel.
Yeah. Yeah, as to your point, why does it say forested, that the open space needs to be forested?
I think it said forested or other unique natural community, and they
Okay.
interpreted that other unique natural community to mean necessarily woods or woodlands, and I'm just saying,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't. A meadow is not excluded from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In addition, all of Vermont was cut down, and all forests are new forests.
Yeah.
Pretty much, and so having contiguous open space means that someday that also could be, you know, trees coming back, or it could stay meadow, but I just wanted to.
I would also point out that it abuts conserved land directly to the east. So yeah, I do think that continuity with that property to the east is important in that regard, is that theoretically though that protected open space would grow up to become forest, and that would essentially become a forested wetland area. Reed?
Two comments. One on the general topic of open space and the language is that I do think we're going to be revisiting that anyway, because I think some of the stuff we've suggested be in the next town plan will drive us that direction to be more specific about what we mean about contiguous and the value that we're trying to deliver. But setting that aside for a minute, looking at the current bylaw language and looking at this and looking at the precedent that we've set with other ARZD developments, for me, the only thing that I look at this and go like cringe a little bit is just the long driveway for that lot 3. If the driveway were only to that western, I guess this is oriented to the north of the building lot area, to the left, that one. If that were where the driveway ended, I feel like I wouldn't cringe at this site plan at all, except for maybe the open space being 3 open space parcels. But to me, it's the long driveway back into that southeast corner, which is area that's to Laura and Kim's point, and David's point. I think it has certain ecological services today, and it has potential to provide connectivity and ecological services more so in the future if it doesn't have a driveway leading back to it. So that's my opinion.
I'll make a general comment, which is that we are talking about the view shed from Butternut Road, which I know seems like a small point, but it is a very rural part of Williston. And so I do view as, you know, that rural view shed from the road to be a significant part of this project and the consideration. So like, you know, as I was looking through this application and looking at staff's alternative, and I know it was just kind of like an alternative, but like.
Oh, you didn't want the houses on the road?
Row houses would not be appropriate in this neighborhood, I guess, is sort of what is my takeaway from this. And so I understand I understand your point completely, but you know, there is a rural character to this area that is not, you know, Taft's Corners, and it's not Finney Crossing. And so seeing row houses out here would be inappropriate. And so I can appreciate that that's the development that you sort of laid out, which is a very spread out, almost rural looking development. I do cringe at the 3 separate open space areas. It's basically unenforceable from my point of view. You know, sure, that goes on to the deed, but you know, sheds happen, things happen, you know, yes, you can demarcate the signs, but you know, you're selling that, you know, the larger northern parcel and outside of the wetlands, like what is to assure the town that open space you know, exists, right? Yeah. That's what I cringe at, is that you know, it's less the layout so much as it is the sort of transferability of this open space from one uniform piece that is just basically not sold, or however that sort of gets deeded to an HOA or whatever, versus like, we're just going to sell 3 separate plots and, you know, we're going to deed it as open space. But what's really to prevent a future owner from, you know, building a shed there without really even like going to this commission or checking the deed to do so?
Well, the staff would pick that up. If somebody came in and said, I want to do a shed, you pull out the plan and say, you can't do a shed, that's your open space lot.
Yeah. I think mowing is the thing we see like the most often, is that people mow more and more and more, like a little bit every year and like push it, and then it
goes
is.
from a meadow to lawn.
Yeah, exactly,
basically.
exactly.
That's what we're concerned about.
Yeah, and I'm struggling with the word must. And I understand it's just over your limit, but you know, you have to, you know, follow the bylaw, and there's no fudging there. And so must be contiguous, we have to figure out what that means, because the DRB will not accept even a recommendation from the Conservation Commission unless it's contiguous.
Is this contiguous as three separate plots? I mean,
I wouldn't call it contiguous.
I think that it is, from the perspective of wildlife, it's contiguous from the perspective of our political boundaries that we draw, it's not. For my concern, it's just, what others have said is how enforceable is it in the long term? Can it be changed, and I just don't know enough about real estate law or the interpretation of town laws and how flexible they are down the road. Understand that.
Yeah, I don't view it as contiguous as currently laid out. And the words in the bylaw that lead me to that is in the first sentence of 31.7.4 says, how is contiguity defined? And it says is unfragmented by development. And to me, when I look at that site plan, it looks like there's holes, and it does not look like, oh, this section is open space and this section has structures. It looks like it's Swiss cheese. So that, to me, that's the piece that doesn't meet the requirement.
so. Andrew, I guess I'm looking for a recommendation is what do you need from us and I'll leave it there.
So
The highlight.
the highlight gives you the option of deciding whether or not you believe this open space is contiguous. And then the way that it's worded, if you chose the should be approved, you could make a recommendation under that recommendation. So under that finding, so you can make a recommendation. Well, my gears are turning. Basically, I see two options here. Three. You could say it is contiguous, and therefore it should be approved. You could say it is not contiguous, and then you could say it should be approved. But you could make a recommendation on a possible adjustment you think the applicant should make. You could also say it is not contiguous and it should not be approved. That would be an outright denial. I don't think you should make a is not, should not, and then a recommendation. You should, if you want to make a recommendation to the applicant on an adjustment you think that should be made to the site plan, I think you should say that it should be approved under the development standards according to our recommendation. Does that
makes sense.
make sense?
Like if our recommendation is followed, it is accounted for, then it should be approved. Is that what you're
Are
saying?
you saying that development is, that the DRB, for instance, you're making, the DRB makes the ultimate decision, right?
Correct.
We're just making a.
Making
A recommendation, right, that the project be approved, or that your interpretation that this is a open space, meets the requirements of the open space is satisfied. I'm a little struggling with this terminology. Are you saying DRB shouldn't approve this, or should, or are you saying the Conservation Committee thinks that this meets the intent of the just that's what we're talking about, not the overall, there's lots of other things that may or may not sway the DRB to approve this project and not just this one issue. So I'm not sure if that's what the intent of this line item is just to talk about whether you think this open space passes the straight face test, not the whole project should be denied by the DRB because of this one issue. DRB might look at it and say, absolutely, this is contiguous, we're good to go.
So I see some crossover between the things you're saying, but I do think that it is the former, in that this question right now is the Conservation Commission is reviewing whether or not they think this is contiguous, and therefore they make a decision on that, and then they make a decision on how it should be treated under the bylaws. Now the recommendation gives them some benefit, I'd say, to the applicant. To, if they don't think that it is contiguous, a recommendation on how you might be able to reach that.
But to clarify, I think what he's asking,
Mhm.
a lack of continuity may indeed be the one reason the project is not approved by the DRB, correct?
Correct, and you could make that recommendation.
Um. I would. I'd like to propose that the finding, state that the open space as currently proposed is not contiguous and therefore should not be approved, and then a recommendation.
I think Andrew's saying, don't do that, say, and
Yeah,
should be
that's what
approved
he-
following the
Following the
recommendation.
Or yeah, yes, and should be approved. Per the recommendation that we're making, and the recommendation that I would like to propose is that lot 3's building envelope should not be set back as far from the road with such a long driveway. That's, to me, that's the one thing that could change that. Sorry, this is about the open space.
I was
that-
like, I'm
that the
so
open
confused.
space.
I'm gonna not vote, but I'm
Let's just-
confused.
That's two
keep it
pieces,
open
to me, it's two
space.
pieces, that lot 3 is the main cause of, if we made it all one open space, I still don't think that all that open space together would, in my mind, look contiguous based on the language in the bylaw. But if lot 3 were, the building envelope was restricted closer to Butternut, then I think that larger open space would be much closer to contiguous.
Could it be even broader so that they have the flexibility, like it needs to be
please
unfragmented
improve
or
upon it.
something, yeah?
What's kind of getting my goat though is that the fragmentation is that these are gonna be separately sold
So I think-
properties and.
I'm saying it should all be one open space lot, so that should be
Right.
a recommendation.
Okay,
And in order to make that open space lot qualify as contiguous, in my opinion, lot 3 building envelope cannot be at the eastern half of the parcel.
Should we?
I don't know. I don't know that we need to make that recommendation. I think rejecting it as contiguous is probably enough because that's gonna force a full redesign and a redraw in order to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, if you convince the DRB that how you've proposed it is the only way it can work because of where the septic has to be situated. That's when, or convince us, that's when it's not contiguous, but we can see why you would want to do it this way.
And I would possibly suggest also having either a significant redesign so that it is one parcel, either in like a horseshoe formation. Or, I mean, that's not ideal, but some form of contiguous parcel that is so clearly,
given- sorry.
Yeah,
Given the amount of time we have.
Yeah.
There are two questions that I see here on whether or not it's contiguous. It's the site design. And how the building lots are located and what you think, is it fragmented or not? And then there's whether or not the open space is 1 or 3 lots. And so I think you should make a recommendation. On both of those if you see fit or neither. But make a recommendation, and you can leave it broad for the applicant. You can say, like, yes, we want to see an adjustment for 1 and then 2. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think, so I think what we're saying is that not getting into the details of where things are housed right now, because that may be an issue, but I'm suggesting, 1, it's not contiguous as proposed. And the recommendation is that the applicant redraw open space as one contiguous, non-deeded parcel.
Yes,
So in a sense, move toward the staff's sketch plan.
or not, but that's.
Not the
okay.
placements, not,
There.
yeah, I mean, you could.
I mean, that's, like you said, that's just totally out of character to have 2 houses side by side right across from the
It
property.
doesn't have to be that way, you could also draw.
Well, that's,
So
Lot 3
all
house
right,
could be
I'm not
just
asking,
halfway
I'm not
between.
asking you to redesign it, but
Right.
there's certain spots that we would love to have houses. Um, and whether it's a horseshoe or something that's, I'd rather give up, lot three's front building envelope just because of the nature of, someone driving down Butternut and all of a sudden, bang, there's two new homes fairly close together,
And
inconsistent with the neighborhood, and they say, why did they do that?
Yeah, no, I,
Because there's
I hear that.
a meadow in the back that will probably, if it becomes an HOA, just won't. They'll just brush hog it once a year and it'll never be used by anybody.
That's why I'm
As
saying,
as opposed to having a house back there that's separate from the road further back. And having that open meadow adjacent to Butternut.
applicant would like to.
yeah, I can add something.
Yeah.
I was very close with the old homeowners when I bought it. And I saw the original design when the property was built a very long time ago. And they actually recommended that barn be built in lot 3 where that is, because it's one of the best areas. And at time, they chose to build the barn where it is because she wanted it in the center of the property. Just to add that in.
There's so many reasons, but at the end of the day, our charge is to hold to the bylaw and make, or like what we feel personally is different from our charge of like making a recommendation that holds to our best interpretation of the bylaw. So I just want to put that out there that like.
Yeah, you don't have to go with the staff's.
No, I
proposal.
understand, yeah. But I
All
don't,
we're saying is that the open space has to be contiguous and and the fragmented three-way separation does not appear consistent with
Right.
our interpretation of the bylaw.
yeah.
But it sounds like you're saying you wanna see one open space parcel. Would you
And-
like to,
And to see it be contiguous.
so
Yes.
that's the second question. Would you like to see a design that puts building lots closer together and closer to the road? Is the general sense, or I'm thinking about how best to describe that.
Can we
but-
just say I'm sorry, I was gonna say unfragmented, but I feel like I should shut up now.
Go ahead.
I feel like. Lots, I don't have it on the screen anymore, but lots 2 and 3, the.
Yeah.
Plots and plats, or what do they call the? Building locations, can be clustered together. Not necessarily right along the road.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you could make a recommendation that it's one parcel and that the building lots are clustered closer together.
Yeah.
To reduce fragmentation.
And honestly, if you wanna reduce this or change this plan to 2 plots and just have, I think the main point is we wanna see one contiguous open space parcel identified in your subdivision plan. And however you wanna design that is up to you at this point, noting obviously the critical habitat corridor, or the migration corridor and the wetlands. And that's what we wanna see. Could be 3, could be 4.
So language here,
3 or 4.
Total parcels identified.
Lots, yeah.
Yeah.
I missed that last part you said, but I've got
No,
a draft recommendation here.
Yeah.
Open space must be one parcel and the proposed building lots should be clustered, or I can say shall. Shall be clustered closer together
To reduce fragmentation of the open space.
to reduce
That's good.
yeah,
fragmentation of the open space. And once again, this is a recommendation to the DRD. So the shalls are stronger recommendations, not requirements.
And then we need to finish up recommendation 1 about the signage.
Mhm.
Anyone object to the signage? We've approved the 100-foot interval signage.
Yeah.
Previously
is acceptable.
is acceptable.
I'm an is on this one.
Yep, great. Great. So any further comments on the recommendations as proposed and edited? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote.
I'll move approval of the findings and recommendations as drafted.
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
I,
Aye,
Aye.
that's 4, 1
One
abstention. Motion carries. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Andrew, do you want to, before we adjourn, do you want to just give a quick update on the Jacob Krantz proposal?
I would like to, yes, I reached out to Nick and they're still waiting on information from their lawyers. So it's been basically the same that it was, but he was going to follow up again. I would also like to share some news with you all. I'm finishing my time with the town in early December.
New job.
So
You were just
Our next-
assigned to us. I feel like we're just.
yeah, our next meeting will be my last meeting with you. I'm moving to Boston and have a few opportunities that I'm exploring. So,
Boston's a great.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
and we've been very lucky with our planners.
Yes, we have.
Thank you.
Is
Yeah, there
the
will be more
town
from
going
us.
to post a new position? Or do we know who we're getting yet?
I'm not sure yet. It's relatively recent news, so we'll see.
Okay.
But in the meantime, another staff member will be covering this commission.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Cool.
Congratulations.
thank you.
Do you have something lined up or just opportunities?
I do. One is, an offer and one is we'll see, but kind of between those two things right now.
Okay.
So,
Are they planning?
yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
My God, a whole new world.
It is. It's very exciting. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all
I
your.
remember moving to New York in my twenties. It was also very exciting. Of course, I was coming from San Francisco, so it was kind of like one coast to the next.